Evan Carter used to think friendship was the safest kind of love, steady, predictable, immune to the storms that wrecked romance. Liam Brooks had been part of his life for almost a decade, woven into his laughter and memories like a familiar scent. They had met in college, two strangers who somehow clicked instantly, finishing each other's jokes, surviving heartbreak side by side, learning how to become adults together. Now, years later, Evan sat in his apartment on a quiet Friday evening, staring at the rain streaming down the window. The city outside hummed, but his home felt still, too still. Daniel, his boyfriend of 5 years, was packing for another weekend work conference. Evan watched him from the couch as he folded shirts into neat squares. There was tenderness in the routine, but not much warmth. Daniel had always been careful, organized, responsible, qualities Evan admired, but lately they'd become barriers between them. "When do you leave?" Evan asked. Daniel didn't look up. "In an hour or so. I'll be back Sunday night." Evan nodded, the response automatic. They exchanged the kind of kiss that belonged to habit more than passion, and then Daniel was gone, leaving behind the faint scent of cologne and the echo of a door closing. The silence that followed wasn't new. It had settled into their relationship like a quiet roommate, polite but unwanted. Evan tried to distract himself, opened Netflix, scrolled through his phone, made coffee he didn't really want. That's when Liam's name lit up his screen. "Movie night." "Haven't seen you in forever," Evan smiled despite himself. It had only been a few weeks since they'd last met, but with Liam, time never felt like a barrier. He typed back before he could overthink it, "Come over." Daniel's out of town. By the time Liam arrived, the rain had grown heavier, turning the street into a blur of reflections. He came in shaking his hair, his denim jacket damp, eyes bright with that familiar easy confidence. "You always pick the perfect nights for a movie marathon," he joked, tossing his jacket over a chair. Evan laughed, feeling something loosen in his chest. "You say that like I control the weather." "Maybe you do." Liam's grin lingered a little too long. They settled on the couch, popcorn between them, the flicker of a movie painting the room in soft light. The conversation flowed as effortlessly as it always had, about work, old friends, plans they never made real. But beneath the laughter, Evan felt something else pulsing quietly between them, something wordless but alive. At one point, their hands brushed while reaching for the same handful of popcorn. The contact was brief, accidental, yet it sent a spark up Evan's arm. He told himself it was nothing, just static, just memory. Still, he pulled his hand back a little too quickly. Liam noticed. "You okay?" "Yeah," Evan said, forcing a small laugh. "Just zoned out." But he wasn't okay. He was remembering things he shouldn't, how Liam used to fall asleep on his shoulder during late-night study sessions, how he'd once said, half drunk, "If I weren't straight, you'd be in trouble." They had laughed it off back then. But now, with the rain outside and the apartment so quiet, the line between memory and desire blurred. The movie played on, forgotten. Conversation drifted into deeper waters. Liam talked about his loneliness, how dating never felt right anymore. "It's like I'm always halfway there," he said softly. "I get close, then something in me pulls back." Evan watched him, the confession stirring something raw inside him. "Maybe you're waiting for the right person." Liam looked at him then, eyes steady. "Maybe." The word hung in the air, too heavy for what it meant. Evan looked away, pretending to focus on the screen, but he could feel Liam's gaze like heat on his skin. They talked until midnight, the movie long forgotten, the popcorn cold. When Liam finally stood to leave, Evan felt the strange reluctance that always came at the end of their nights together, a sense that something important had been left unfinished. At the door, Liam hesitated. "You've been quiet lately," he said. "You and Daniel okay?" Evan forced a smile. "Yeah. Just, life, I guess." Liam tilted his head, studying him. "You don't have to say you're fine if you're not." The kindness in his voice undid Evan more than any accusation could have. "It's complicated," he admitted. "He's good to me. Just, distant. We used to talk about everything. Now it feels like we're just maintaining something that used to mean more. Liam nodded, the sympathy in his eyes making it harder to keep his voice steady. You deserve to feel wanted, Ev. The words were gentle, but they landed with unexpected weight. Evan felt the truth of them like a hand pressing against his chest. He didn't respond, just looked at Liam, searching for something he couldn't name. For a moment, neither of them moved. Then Liam smiled faintly, almost apologetically, and said, I'll see you soon, yeah. Evan managed a nod. Yeah. After Liam left, Evan stood by the window, watching the rain trace lines down the glass. The city lights blurred, shimmering like something about to dissolve. He pressed his forehead to the cool pane and exhaled that he told himself it was harmless. A moment of nostalgia, a night of comfort between old friends. But deep down, he knew better. There had been something in the way Liam looked at him, something in the silence that followed those words, and maybe what scared him most wasn't that Liam had said them, it was that he hadn't wanted him to stop, that he turned off the lights, climbed into bed alone, and stared at the ceiling until sleep blurred his thoughts. Outside, the rain softened to a drizzle, steady and relentless. In the darkness, Evan whispered a truth he didn't want to admit aloud, the line between friendship and something more, maybe it was never as clear as I thought. The thought lingered, a quiet confession swallowed by the hum of the city below. Evan hadn't planned to see Liam again so soon, but plans rarely meant much where he was concerned. 3 days after their movie night, Liam texted him a photo of a cafe latte with a crooked heart drawn in the foam and wrote, You'd make fun of this, wouldn't you? Evan smiled before he could stop himself. Their rhythm returned effortlessly, messages that started as jokes turned into long, thoughtful conversations that filled the hours Daniel's silence used to occupy. At first, it felt harmless. Evan told himself he needed the friendship, that Liam's warmth was a reminder he wasn't invisible. But with every message, the air between them thickened, charged with something they both pretended not to feel. Liam began to ask more personal questions, how things were with Daniel, whether Evan was happy, what he wanted that he wasn't getting. They were the kinds of questions Daniel never asked anymore, and Evan found himself answering honestly, sometimes too honestly. By Friday, Liam suggested they grab dinner. It's been a long week, he said over the phone. You could use a break. Evan hesitated, thinking of Daniel's text that morning, a rushed apology for working late again, but he agreed. The evening was warm, heavy with summer humidity. They chose a small restaurant near the waterfront, the kind of place they'd always liked, dim lighting, slow jazz, and the hum of quiet conversation around them. Liam looked effortlessly relaxed, wearing a simple black shirt that clung to his shoulders in a way Evan tried not to notice. They talked easily at first, about old memories, college stories, the projects they once dreamed of doing together. But as the night deepened, the conversation turned inward again. Liam leaned forward, his elbows on the table. Do you ever feel like you're living a life that doesn't belong to you anymore? Evan stirred his drink, avoiding his gaze. Every day. That's not how it should feel. I know, Evan said softly. But when you've built something with someone for years, you don't just walk away because it gets quiet. Liam nodded, but his eyes didn't soften. Quiet isn't the same as empty. Evan looked up then, caught off guard by the firmness in Liam's voice. You sound like you're speaking from experience. Maybe I am, Liam said, and the corner of his mouth lifted, but the smile didn't reach his eyes. When they left the restaurant, the sky was bruised purple with distant thunder. A storm rolled in faster than expected, wind sweeping across the street as they hurried toward Evan's car. By the time they reached it, rain was falling in sheets. Visibility was terrible. Evan turned the key but hesitated. It's coming down too hard, he said. We should wait it out. Or head back to yours, Liam suggested quietly. It's closer. Evan hesitated only a moment too long before nodding. Back at the apartment, the sound of rain against the windows filled the silence. Liam stood by the door, brushing water from his hair, smiling in that lopsided way that always disarmed him. You still keep this place exactly the same, he said. Even the same candle on the table. Some things don't change, Evan replied, some things should, Liam said under his breath, almost too soft to catch. They sat on the couch again, like they had the week before, but everything felt different. The space between them wasn't friendly anymore, it pulsed with something restless, unspoken. They talked, but the words barely mattered. It was the pauses that held weight, the glances that lingered too long. At one point, Evan confessed what he hadn't told anyone. "Sometimes I think Daniel doesn't see me anymore," he said. "Like I'm furniture in his life, comfortable, reliable, unnoticed." Liam's voice dropped low. "That's not you. You deserve someone who sees you. Who looks at you and can't look away." Evan froze, unsure how to respond. He tried to laugh it off, but the sound came out wrong, shaky, thin. Liam reached out, resting a hand on his arm. It was meant to be comforting, maybe, but the touch lingered. "Liam," Evan whispered, "don't." "I'm not doing anything," Liam said, though his thumb brushed gently against Evan's sleeve. "You are," Evan said, but he didn't pull away. The thunder cracked outside, startling them both, yet neither moved. Evan's breath caught as their eyes met, steady, searching. The silence between them felt like a held breath, too long, too fragile. And then Liam leaned in, hesitating only when their faces were inches apart. Evan didn't know who closed the distance. The kiss was soft, brief, and utterly ruinous. It wasn't wild or desperate, it was careful, full of all the restraint that had built up over years of pretending. When Liam pulled back, his expression was unreadable, guilt, longing, fear all tangled together. "I shouldn't have," Liam murmured. Evan shook his head, voice low. "You didn't do it alone." They sat in silence, the sound of rain wrapping the moment in a strange intimacy. Evan could still feel the imprint of the kiss, the taste of it lingering like something dangerous and familiar. His heart pounded so loud it drowned out the storm. "This can't happen again," he said finally, though his voice lacked conviction. "I know," Liam replied, but his gaze said something else. When Liam stood to leave, Evan followed him to the door. The air between them was electric, humming with everything unsaid. Liam hesitated with his hand on the handle. "You're not alone, you know," he said quietly. "Even if it feels like it." Evan wanted to believe him. "Good night, Liam." Liam's smile was faint, fragile. "Good night, Ev." When the door closed, Evan leaned against it, exhaling shakily. He stared into the dim apartment, every detail suddenly unfamiliar. The couch, the candle, the untouched wine glass, all reminders of the life he'd built so carefully, now trembling on a single moment's edge. He walked to the window, watching lightning fracture the sky. His reflection stared back, haunted, uncertain, alive. He pressed his hand against the glass, tracing the rain's slow descent, and thought about the feel of Liam's lips, the warmth that shouldn't have existed. Evan didn't know what would come next, whether guilt would swallow the memory or if it would grow into something he couldn't contain. But as he stood there, the truth settled quietly in his chest. He had crossed something he could never fully uncross, and worse than that, he wasn't sure he wanted to. Morning light crept through the curtains like a quiet intruder, soft but unforgiving. Evan woke to the faint scent of rain still lingering in the air, though the storm had passed. The apartment felt heavy, thick with the memory of the night before. Every object seemed to hum with silent accusation, the couch, the half-empty wineglass, even the candle burned low on the table. He moved through the motions of morning automatically, coffee, shower, the mechanical rhythm of someone trying to feel ordinary. But nothing about the morning was ordinary. Liam's touch still lingered on his skin like a bruise no one could see. Liam hadn't texted. Evan hadn't either. That silence stretched across the day, taut and fragile, filling the spaces where laughter used to live. When Daniel returned that evening, suitcase in hand and eyes shadowed with exhaustion, Evan felt his stomach twist. Daniel smiled faintly, kissed his cheek, and said, "Missed you," like he always did. But there was no warmth behind it. Only habit. Evan tried to smile back, tried to meet his eyes. But for the first time in years, he couldn't hold Daniel's gaze. Every word that came out of his mouth felt borrowed, rehearsed. Dinner was quiet. The sound of utensils scraping plates became unbearable. Later, while Daniel showered, Evan stood at the window again. The city lights blinked like distant signals, unreachable. He thought of Liam, his laugh, the way he'd said you deserve to be seen. The words echoed in him, over and over, until guilt and longing blurred together into something unrecognizable. The next few days passed in fragments. Texts from Liam came eventually, short and cautious. "You okay?" Followed by, "I'm sorry if I made things complicated." Evan stared at the words for a long time before replying. "You didn't do it alone." After that, neither of them said much. But silence between them was never empty, it pulsed, full of things they didn't dare name. A week later, Liam showed up unannounced. He stood at the door like he wasn't sure he should be there, hands shoved into his jacket pockets, eyes uncertain. Daniel was at work. Evan hesitated, then stepped aside. They didn't hug. They didn't smile. The quiet between them felt like a confession. "I had to see you," Liam said finally. Not to start anything. I just couldn't leave it the way it was." Evan nodded, throat tight. "You didn't ruin anything," he said, though he wasn't sure if it was true. Liam looked at him for a long moment. "You don't believe that?" Evan turned away, staring at the framed photos on the wall, him and Daniel smiling at a beach 2 years ago, arms around each other, the picture of stability. But now it looked staged, almost cruel in its perfection. "I keep thinking about that night," Evan admitted. "Not just what happened, but why. I shouldn't have let it happen. But I did. And I don't know what that says about me." Liam stepped closer, his voice steady but soft. "It says you're human. You were lonely. So was I. That doesn't make it right." "No," Liam agreed. "But it makes it real." Evan finally turned to face him. "What are we supposed to do now?" Liam exhaled, a sound caught between a laugh and a sigh. "We stop pretending it didn't happen. But we don't keep breaking things either." Something in his tone felt final, like the closing of a chapter neither wanted to end. They stood in silence for a moment. Then Liam reached out, brushing a strand of hair from Evan's forehead, a gesture so gentle it broke something inside him. "I don't regret caring about you," he said. "But I do regret the timing." Evan felt his chest tighten. "I wish I'd met you first." Liam's expression flickered with pain. "If you had, maybe we wouldn't be us." He smiled sadly, stepped back, and said, "Goodbye, Evan." The door closed softly, but the sound of it echoed long after he was gone. Evan sat on the couch for a long time, staring at the empty space Liam had left behind. The apartment felt smaller now, as though the walls themselves were closing in. He wanted to call him back, to undo everything, but he knew he couldn't. When Daniel came home that night, Evan was still sitting in the same spot. He looked up and saw Daniel's tired face, the faint kindness in his eyes dulled by years of distance. Evan realized then that the truth, however painful, was the only way to breathe again. "I need to tell you something," he said quietly. Daniel frowned, setting down his keys. "What is it?" Evan took a breath that trembled on its way out. "I've been distant. And it's not just work, or stress. It's me. I crossed a line with someone." Daniel didn't speak. He just stared at him, disbelief flickering across his face before settling into silence. The quiet that followed was brutal, heavy, suffocating. "Was it him?" Daniel asked finally, his voice low. Evan nodded. "It wasn't planned. I didn't mean for it to happen. But it did." Daniel looked away, his jaw tightening. "I don't know what to say." "There's nothing to say," Evan whispered. "I'm sorry." Daniel nodded slowly, then left the room. The sound of the bedroom door closing was soft, almost tender. But it felt like an ending. That night, Evan lay awake, staring at the ceiling. The apartment felt too quiet, like the world had paused to let him feel the full weight of what he'd done. And yet, beneath the guilt, something else stirred, a fragile sense of clarity. Weeks passed. The apartment changed, one less toothbrush, one empty drawer, silence where laughter used to live. Evan didn't see Liam again, though sometimes he caught himself checking his phone, waiting for a message that never came. One evening, months later, Evan found himself walking along the same waterfront where they'd once had dinner. The air smelled of rain again, the same heavy, aching kind of night. He stopped near the railing, watching reflections tremble in the dark water. He thought of Daniel, steady, patient, deserving of better. He thought of Liam, reckless, kind, and the spark that had reminded him what it meant to feel. Evan closed his eyes and let the sound of the waves fill the silence inside him. He wasn't sure what came next, redemption, loneliness, maybe both. But for the first time in a long while, he wasn't pretending. When he opened his eyes, the city lights shimmered on the surface like fading stars. He whispered into the night, more to himself than anyone else, maybe I let him cross the line because I was already standing on the other side. And then he walked on, the sound of rain beginning again, soft, steady, endless.